being an historian, if you will, or a scholar doesn't, there's often the mistaken notion that that somehow makes you dispassionate about what you do. And really nothing could be farther from the truth. I have been doing this for so long, and I spend so many hours each day doing it. You don't do what I do unless you're passionate about what you do. You don't do what I do unless when you read these texts, you have moment after moment of going, oh, wow, and feeling, they said something that I could say today. They said, you have these incredible moments of connection where like a voice just breaks through from the past and you think, how 2,000 years ago did someone have that brilliant insight or that brilliant thought that just seems so real and so fascinating or so interesting? Or even if I disagree with it, wow, how could anybody view things so radically differently from me, and how would I struggle with that? So I'm not just passionate about these texts, even though sometimes I really want to be careful about giving each one its historical due and its historical context. Beyond that, they are still ideas and they're still exciting.
At a certain point, and I think this is basically where Torah goes wrong. At a certain point, a community of Torah has to start, a community that sees its work as embedded in Torah has to think beyond its own four walls. So in the deepest expressions of diasporism, I could allow for my Beit Midrash, my yeshiva, was only responsible for its constituents. It's because I'm not responsible for the public square. But I guess the test is, can the same template that is born in diasporism actually become a template for the governance of a society? And the answer I would say is, don't know yet, because it's not working great.
Rashi realizes that it could go the other way around. That your memory as being persecuted, it might energize you to persecute other people. Some have to give it back. Somehow, if I had bad moments, so I have to somehow, like this is pathologies that people that were abused many times grew up to be people that abuse. So that could happen to nations too. So yes, Rashi is very well aware that our experiences in Egypt, and I guess all historic memories of Jews could actually, memory of pain can make you have less empathy and feel entitled to power. It could do that. And it could also amplify empathy. It could go both ways. What the Bible tries to do, it tries to channel the memory of vulnerability and direct it towards empathy and not anything else.
Shakespeare asks the question to be or not to be. That is not the question of the Torah. The question of the Torah is not to be or not to be. The question of the Torah is to see or not to see, to say or not to say, to intervene or not to intervene. Who will you be, she asks me. Who will I be? Who will we be? Ayeka, ech. It's about the installation, the whole pipeline of how do we work within this world that is so far away from what we expect and expected, and yet it exists with all these troubles. Ayeka comes from ech. It's not about the what, it's about the how. How do we go about this world? And what is our responsibility? To see or not to see, to say or not to say.
But the notion that criticism is inherently irrelevant, that's my problem is before we decide which criticism we want to listen to, which one we don't, and how much we want to care about it, we immunize ourselves. Yeah. It's that immunization that I think is inherently counter to our decision to be a nation in the world.
Right, to return to history. Let's ask whether we should make a distinction, though, between the kind of internal Jewish conversation, like criticism from Jews and criticism from the nations
That's
of the
world.
That's a big one. Right? Do you make a distinction there?
Now, for me, that distinction is a really big one. The embracing of criticism and then filtering it is an inherent part of our decision to be a sovereign nation amongst the nations of the world, not to be a sovereign nation on our own island, but to live in the midst of a world, to have trade and relationships and shared culture and learning. our decision to listen to criticism from Jews is not an inherent part of our sovereignty. It's an inherent part of the Jewish state's commitment to being the homeland of the Jewish people.
I think we're going through a lot of crises. We're going through, social upheaval. We're entering now into a big storm in Israel, socially and politically. But I would say that in these months, the image of me, of Bina, of kind of opening up, which I find so beautifully and in such simple language portrayed in the language of Yechezkel Rachamim, kind of just doing that act of lifting my head from, from the computer screens, from the Zoom screens, from the news, from being locked into kind of one type of horizon, allowing myself to open up to the unknown, which carries in it mystery. That has been an amazing source of comfort for me.
I want a Judaism that believes in religious pluralism and human rights as not as external variables that limit my Judaism, but because that's what I think is the authentic voice of the Jewish tradition itself. And if Israel ultimately becomes a non-democracy, and many have argued that are already in parts of Israel, Palestine, we're seeing things that are not a democracy. I simply can't be a part of it. So I guess let me put this again as an active question. What does it look like to fight for democracy right now? What are the activities that Israelis should be doing to fight on behalf of their democracy, even if they're okay with annexing this part of Area C?
Okay, well, for me, the premise is that you can never freeze the frame when it comes to Israel. This is an extraordinarily dynamic place which is constantly reinventing itself in good ways and bad ways, but you can't freeze the frame. There have been so many distinct Israels that I've lived through in 40 years here, that to say Israel is this, Israel, or if Israel, God forbid, loses its democratic identity, that Israel is now permanently non-democratic, to my mind, that would mean that we're going through a very bad phase. And I feel that the roots of Israeli democracy are deep enough that even if, God forbid, we were to temporarily lose our democratic identity, there would be enough of a possibility for retrieval in the same way that other democratic societies that have lost their democratic institutions and then restored them.
And I just want to thank all of you for joining us for Hartman Summer. It's made such a difference to us, to the people who are teaching and producing and doing the behind the scenes, to know that we're in people's living rooms, we're in their hearts, we're talking about the issues that matter to them. It makes you want to get up in the morning, even though it's a really tough time. And I just want to wish everybody just health and safety and meaning and love, and just keep learning and keep being the wonderful people that you are, and keep being part of our community. Thank you so much.